impact to economies worldwide. It's about myself. I'm also an advisory board member for the European Crowdfunding Network for Austria and Italian, so I can speak about other experiences as well. We have time.
Thank you very much. Matthew, please.
Cheers for the invitation. I am the Australian on the panel here. I'd like to say a warm welcome from Australia. Thank you very much for the invitation to China. I feel that this is a second home for me, being a Sydney sider. We have many Chinese and a very strong relationship with China. My role here is the chair of the Australian Crowdfunding Society, so similar to your organisation, slightly older, but very much in the same space. We've had huge success with government in terms of getting a unified voice, and we're looking forward to significant changes in regulation as a consequence of that.
Scott, another old friend.
Thank you, Zhang Xiaochen, for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, and I knew coming into this morning this was going to be more of a learning experience for me than it may be for you. So it's been fascinating to be in China for my first time, and I'm honored again. Thank you for having me. My name again is Scott McIntyre. I'm the Vice President of the Crowdfunding Professional Association. This is the preeminent trade organization in the United States for implementing and organizing the new legislation that was part of the Jobs Act, which others have spoken about today. My role in the organization now is basically co-chairing committees, so I help the organization grow in particular areas, as well as represent us at speaking engagements like this. My professional experience, I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole life, with the exception of one job in the 1990s. So for me, this was something that needed to happen. It was going to happen, and the moment that I saw crowdfunding, it reminded me just of the earliest days of the internet. I've told this story probably too many times this week, but when the internet was first being unleashed on the public, I was part of a group of thinkers in Los Angeles that saw how the implementation of this new technology was going to take place and change the world, which it has. I think crowdfunding is the best possible use of the internet, and I am thrilled to see China embrace it with such progressive thought as they have. So I look forward to it. I'm also in the education space. I was recently appointed to be the director of the first Center for Entrepreneurship Development at the University of Toledo. And this is a research university in the Middle West of the United States. And I intend to put crowdfunding in equal weight along with the entrepreneurship education and training. We will be administering crowdfunding education and training as well. So as much as students as there are here, I believe that crowdfunding along with education is critical to the continuum of a good idea to a capital market. So I'm thrilled again to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And the first question I have to each one.
I can be Israeli and rude? Yes,
please.
Sorry. I'd like to know you better, so maybe our answers could serve you, if it's okay. To learn about who's entrepreneurs, investors, government, non-profit. Yes? We can do it. You're sure? I read a lot about the Chinese culture, and as an Israeli, I try not to insult anyone, but I just want to learn a bit more so we can be instrumental for you. Who's an entrepreneur in the crowd who would like to raise money through crowdfunding?
谁是创业者？然后谁正在准备用这个众筹的方式去为自己的企业、为自己的 idea 去一位、两位、三位、四位。Not many.
Not many. So you have a crowd here to start with. Now we are your first seat and first degree of separation. So who's an investor in this field or a crowdfunding platform? Okay. All the rest which came for the food. I was kidding. So from the government or from non-profit?
谁是来自于政府或者是非政府组织？已经他们举手了。对。
Okay.
对。
I see. Okay, we'll try to be, for the 90% that didn't vote, we'll try to be instrumental.
Well, we should be more entertaining, right?
That's for sure. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so as all of you are the drivers for crowdfunding in your country, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. What drives crowdfunding in your country, in addition to yourself?
I'll start. I think that one of the first issues that come in mind when you're thinking about an association is regulation. But I truly feel that it's much more than that. Regulation is an enabler, but market education is the first challenge that each association has. And I think that it's not only educating the government or the regulators, but mostly building an ecosystem. Crowdfunding can't live without an ecosystem, a living and breathing ecosystem of entrepreneurs and investors, of researchers that are bringing transparency into the market, of non-profits who are driving fundraising, or financial institutes that are matching the funds. So I think that one of the major issues, the European Crowdfunding Network, for example, is to educate the market through reports, through conferences, through all sorts of engagements with all sorts of parties to co-create the crowdfunding ecosystem. So I think that's the number one challenge.
So I think the message that we have as an institute, but also in terms of our practical research and knowledge, is very much that within Australia, that the Australian campaigns that don't reach a fourth, fifth circle. So again, drawing back to Paul's earlier comment, that the regular successful campaigns that are still hundreds of thousands of dollars are, in Australian dollar terms, predominantly raised from Australians and then on Australian platforms. They're not, even though the default is, and when you type into a search engine, it'll come up with the American platforms, the default assumption is Kickstarter and Indiegogo. When somebody says crowdfunding, they may as well say those two. But in the Australian experience, that we have a very strong fundraising from Australians. Now, that's up to 70% depending on the category. Now, there's some pollution in that number because Australian businesses will promote themselves on foreign platforms in that country's currency. So in US dollar terms, and a big example of that in recent times is Flowhigh, which was over 12 million US dollars raised. So that number doesn't come into that particular stack, but I think it stands out of that circle because of the fact that it did capture the imagination and become such a successful campaign. $2 million on day one. I'm a bit dirty because I actually talked to them about doing some fundraising for them. So I'll probably leave that to the success and the innovation of that particular product. So I think my message from that is to China, to not be afraid that just because you've got international experts here and say, oh, well, look, this is crowdfunding, therefore we need to look to Indiegogo or Kickstarter, or indeed what we're telling you, that it will be Chinese that will support a Chinese ecosystem that will build spectacular platforms in this country, because that's been proven in other technology spaces already. So I think there's a bit of a takeaway there, and I'm very happy to share that with you. And I wish you best of luck and continued good relations between our countries.
Thank you very much.
So Jen, if I understand the question correctly, is what was driving crowdfunding? I think it's a good place as a segue from much of what Paul discussed in his two key words that were left with me, which were meaningful and local. And so as regards the adoption of crowdfunding as a new strategy for capital creation, crowdfunding is really just picking up where the internet has seeded our psyche, has seeded our behaviors, has seeded the nature of communication that we have as people, both locally and globally. So for me personally, I will come back to the local component of meaningful and local, which I think are very valuable concepts, because one of the first things that I teach my students in entrepreneurship is that if they're going to seek the assistance of others, They have to present what it is they're looking for in assistance in a way that is relevant to them. And relevance, to me, is one of the most important words in my lexicon, because without it, you could be speaking a different language to someone. It just doesn't matter. It has to be personal, and that gets back to the meaningful component of it. So as far as the local part, I think this also is reflective in some of the slides that we saw today as regards the nature of trust. And trust happens to be a huge, huge component of what drives crowdfunding to successful conclusions. Without trust, just as without relevance, you're not going to find anyone that's able to see you for what you're worth, or to see your product or project for what it's worth and what it means. So keep in mind when you're pursuing your opportunities, when you're pursuing your investors, that relevance and meaningful subject matter are truly critical. As far as what's driving it, I think it's the nature of communication mostly that's driving it. I think, judging by what appears to be the youth in this room, you're in a tremendously magical time, and you're going to look back at this in 10 or 20 years and say, wow, I can't believe we were at the beginning of that, because this is truly changing. I'll use the word revolutionary very delicately here. But this is truly a revolution, and it's not a government versus the people, it's not military, it's purely a social contract, a new social contract that's being constructed between people and their peers. Because instead of having to go to a central bank, instead of having to go to any investor that you may not know directly, whether he's your uncle or your brother, you now can go to your neighbors, you can go to your friends, because with so many of you, especially in this country where you have so many people, it doesn't take much from any one of you to reach out if it's relevant and if it's meaningful, to find the money that you need to make something meaningful and relevant in return. So I really think it's the ability to communicate with your peers and to make a case to them that what you're doing is meaningful, not just to you, but to them. And that's a communication tool. I like to say that among my peers that maybe aren't from the generation that you are, the kids today they have such strong thumbs. And it's kind of a joke, but if you look in the streets, I put a picture yesterday of a gentleman sleeping in the Forbidden City against a tree, and he was literally asleep with his phone just like this. And I thought that just perfectly demonstrates how fluid and easy it is for people of this generation to communicate anything and everything at a whim. So I think it's a wonderful time. You're in for a ride.
Thank you for your insights. And I think Dan should just treat you for dinner sometime, because you are promoting his book and the crowdfunding revolution, and you use the word again and again. So maybe Dan just communicated with me just now that for the next session, if you just for the first person who just ask a question, and then you may get you will get the book from him, right?
I'm trying to create a dialogue.
Okay,
now
great.
I'm using cheap techniques, but they might work.
Okay, and so I will ask my last question, then I will open the floor to everyone. And the question is to you. Since after I came back and I heard a lot from different events, and everyone is talking about crowd investor allocation in crowdfunding, because again, many of them didn't have experience, and then they are entering into a field which was extremely high risk, and then they're excited, maybe too excited sometimes, and that's why a lot of players in the field need to take the responsibility for education. And I want to understand better that what does crowdfunding association do in advancing crowd investor allocation, and have you heard any good practice in your country, or are you doing it now?
This is a critical subject at the Crowdfunding Professional Association, of which my friend Zhang Xiaochen is now on the board of directors with me as well. So look to him for answers after I'm gone. But education and training happens to be one of the 3 committees that we operate at the CFPA. And although the organization is still relatively new in terms of an organization, we're also still waiting final rules from our regulatory body, the SEC, on how this new marketplace can operate legally. So We haven't concluded our education and training strategy, but we have begun with a number of key initiatives, the first of which actually was the first project that I worked on as a member of the CFPA, and that was in editing a presentation given by Jason's partner, Woody Neese, who is a founding member of our association as well, and another colleague of ours, Ryan Fike, who now owns a Title II platform. And the two of them did a wonderful job of kind of introducing the subject of crowdfunding, and it was a very, very long video. So I took the opportunity to edit that down into smaller tidbits. So if you're interested in this kind of original look at how crowdfunding was perceived, please visit cfpa.org, and you're welcome to find that in the video section. But as far as education goes, we're at the moment amalgamating a list of all the resources that we have found as individuals and as organizations at other places, and also we'll be amalgamating a list of resources and education materials from other associations worldwide. Our ambition, as many associations' ambitions are, is to be a central clearinghouse for information and news, as well as a voice of reason to the government. So both of these have impact on education and training, but as we evolve, we may also get into the business of certifying other education providers. There's a number of organizations in the United States that provide training for education, including offering certificates of that education experience to its graduates. Well, as with any new industry, some will be good, some will be less than good, and so our job, we believe, and as our members would request us to do, are involved in making sure that the education that is being granted out there is comprehensive, thorough, and effective. And so that'll be another process of ours going forward.
Any details?
Yeah, so you covered quite a few topics, and I'd probably talk for a day on that. So I'd probably stick to the investor aspect, because that's something a bit more near and dear. We live in a time where the Steve Jobs syndrome, if you like, is becoming more and more real. Steve is famous for saying that I'm afraid of the man in the garage, because, of course, Apple started in the garage. The speaker earlier talked about the internet and the advent of mobile technology and major global changes that are really creating opportunities for everyone, particularly in China. So I see that as with the backdrop of super low interest rates as a very unique situation where startup businesses have both huge opportunities and value increases, and also a huge risk, because they're not just competing with their local businesses, they're competing with everyone. Now, China's been exceptionally well competing with everyone, and particularly in terms of manufacturing. So the next piece, which is an obvious policy step, is to compete in the context of innovation. And this is the space for crowdfunding, and this is the space which engineering and China's excellence in engineering come into play, which is part of the reason why I'm excited to be here. But you have to reflect on that the opportunities are 6,000 times your money back with a digitised business. It's not a question of making 10 times. The exit rates for seed money on major tech companies are exponential. $25,000 in Uber is $125 million. Okay? So if that's the potential, then the risk is also magnified, because people see the potential. Yeah? But this isn't a reason to just look at this innovative type of funding and say, okay, it's too high risk, we have to shut it down. But it's to acknowledge the fact that there needs to be a contextualisation for it. We look at that in terms of this regulatory backdrop and the education as something where looking at the participants in the industry and regulating where those people have the skill is the right place to do it. So it's the brand reputation of the platforms such as ASOC and the ones that will follow that will determine whether the regulator will accept and tolerate those practices, or whether they will turn around and say, no, there's bad players being let through because this particular participant is too greedy or just doesn't have proper systems, and that's I think a key player because it utilises the main transaction. People have all, as we had discussed earlier, people have been coming together to make mutual investment decisions for time immemorial. So what has changed is the fact that you grab that phone out and the information's there and it's digitised, so it costs nothing to share it all around the world. So that transparency is something that when you put it to full power actually creates a massive opportunity for everyday investors to connect in this unique new social contract that we're talking about. So I've kind of covered the question, but that's my short view.
And a quick follow-up regarding investor education. That seems to be where most of my colleagues are focused is because the SEC, our regulatory body, is concerned that there could be another opportunity for a bubble. And if you let everybody come in, all guns blazing, and pouring all their money into it, all their savings into it, and we have another collapse of the stock market like we did with the internet bubble collapsing, then we'll be in another crisis. And so I think there's been a lot of apprehension to grant free will to the people, if you will, on the amount that they can invest. So we're also seeing from the retail investor side, from the non-accredited investor side, that there will be limits to the amount of money that they can invest, and it's proposed that it will be probably around 10% of their annual earnings or net worth. So the risk is going to be mitigated tremendously by the amount of money that any one individual is going to be able to invest. On the investor education side, for accredited investors, it comes down to the issue of what defines whether an investor is accredited. And this is a subject, sometimes a humorous subject, because in previous schemes, an accredited investor was known to be accredited simply because he was wealthy. The assumption being, well, if he's wealthy, he must be intelligent. And we all know that's not the case all the time. Sometimes people get lucky, and sometimes people inherit money, and sometimes you just don't know. So with regards to that, we may also see redefinition of what is an accredited investor. Someone can either be sophisticated or they can be wealthy. They may not be wealthy, but they may be far smarter than the wealthiest person next to them. So all of these things are in shift. So we're also growing at the same time that you're growing, and I think the transparency of this new marketplace is what excites me the most, because the opportunity to share freely amongst not just competing nations, but competing organizations is rare. And it's that type of cooperation, what we in my firm call open source communication. It's truly critical, and you're part of that as well.
Before Dan jump in, the reason for me to ask that question, because although I'm converted, but I do have very big concerns for crowdfunding development in China. And if you just really pay attention to the stock market in China and you see what is happening, and if investors who don't really have knowledge and jump into the stock market and throw all their money there, and finally what happens? And it's really, really highly risky. And the crowdfunding actually is as risky or even more risky. And if you don't have that knowledge, and also if the regulation is not clear enough, or if the players have not really integrated that concern into the platform yet, then if they are just move because they got burned from the stock market, they say, what are the next opportunities? If crowdfunding is the next big thing, and then if they really jump into that, that actually creates a high risk for the society in general, and also it creates risk for the industry, and that could really just kill the industry if that happens. So that's why I think that the experience from US and from Australia and from Israel is extremely important. And the other thing I think is really important is that for example, in US, that is rich is smart. That's the criteria used for accredited investor. And here in China is smart and rich that make you. But in general, that yesterday I was in another crowdfunding event that the person just shared that in China we have around 100 angel investors all over China, and then they are doing angel-related crowdfunding work. And then accredited investor is also a small pool, not big. And then a lot of players who are already entered into the crowdfunding side, they are not accredited, that they are not angel, but they are doing crowdfunding. So that's really just it's a big concern for me. So I would like to have share us with your experience. Yeah.
I'm a politician. I'm answering another question. No, I'm kidding. I'll answer that. I think that I'm very glad to hear that you are looking at as a balanced point of view and not only on the bright side of crowdfunding, because as an association, I think it's crucial to look 360 degrees and not only the shining examples of crowdfunding. As it seems, and I'm just learning, it's my first 24 hours in China, you're doing the right moves. You're establishing an association, you're establishing a research center, and I think it could bring the foundations of transparency and data, and I think it's a blessed move. I think that the next step is to think that how can crowdfunding could be instrumental for China's growth. Not like any other countries, but to think about the cultural differences, think about all the assets that are inherent in the Chinese culture, economic, business, etc., and try to tailor crowdfunding to your needs. Just a few thoughts about the bottom of pyramid. We didn't discuss it yet, but maybe we should. How can crowdfunding not only make an impact on a few entrepreneurs here, on SMEs, but also to make an impact on bottom of pyramid? What can we do with the 650 million people which are connected to the internet and maybe could invest small amounts but still can participate in the crowd? And you do have a crowd. Unlike Israel, which is like a neighborhood here in Beijing, you have a crowd. Now, how can we tap into the crowd and make it accessible? How can we harness non-profits and corporates? Because I truly feel that the next stage of crowdfunding is to harness corporates, whether it's financial institutes, non-profits. They can do it for marketing, innovation, human resources. How can we tap into these kinds of resources in order to leverage and to make it a more successful ecosystem for your growth? And I think that just like other associations that I'm involved with, the question is not only to see how international associations are working, but to just find the proper ways to do it here. And to do it here is to learn and then implement your best practices, to create your own voice in order to make an impact.
Just to get myself an invitation for dinner, and Zhang has another book just issued, and that is on the corporate crowdfunding, and so...
That's the gift for the first question.
Okay, perfect.
So I'd like to create a dialogue, because I think that the crowdfunding is more about the dialogue than about talking. So because I saw you are participating in such a volume, we'll try a small technique that works in Israel. Maybe it will work here.
Okay.
I have a copy of the new book. It was published yesterday in the UK, and we'll give it together to the first one who will ask a question.
Yeah, so if you have questions, just raise your hand. Okay, we see definitely you are the first one.
It should be a question of crowdfunding. That's the only thing.
Who can give the mic to
I'll bring the
anyone?
To make it a reality.
I think you need to sign it as well. Add some value.
I learned that you're giving something like this. So.
Thank you very much. 不好意思，我想用中文提这个问题。我想用中文提这个问题。
I'll translate.
Speak slowly.
来，先介绍一下，我是来自中安保险的，然后我们这个公司是阿里巴巴、腾讯和平安投的一家互联网保险公司。然后呢，我们这个保险公司的定位是在做服务于互联网生态的保险。所以我想提的，我可能举个例子吧，就比如说我们现在公司做的比较大的一个险种，就比如说给阿里巴巴的生态里面淘宝提供的退货运费险。包括我们最近也跟中国最大的一个基因公司做了第一款互联网的基因保险。那么就说我今天想提的关于众筹的问题，肯定是跟风险有关的，因为我们公司是只做 online insurance， 只做互联网保险，所以我们会关注整个互联网生态的发展， 然后呢，在互联网金融方面，我们看过互联网 P2P lending， 我们也看过众筹行业的发展。我们之前包括研究过，就是说在全球众筹行业里面，可能众筹方面的保险可能还非常少。我们之前看到过，在美国 Indiegogo 他们有做过关于一个商品众筹的保险，但是它这个保险呢，其实是 Indiegogo 他自己这个平台做的，并没有跟保险公司合作。我们一直分析说，在众筹的这个行业里面，其实如果要众筹这个行业，就说从风险管控方面来说，历史数据可能没有办法很大的服务，很好的服务于风险管控，因为它的所有的项目都是新的，所以你无法利用历史数据来测算风险，这是第一个。然后第二个就是说，第二个就是说，在那个众筹的这个行业的话，我们因为它的所有的投资人，他投的时候都是投一个项目。所以它的风险是没有办法分散的，所以也没有办法用大数法则来去算它的这个风险发生的这个概率。所以我们想问一下，根据你们的经验，在国外的话，有没有比较好的方法在那个众筹的这个行业里面做一个风险的评估和管理？因为现在在中国的众筹行业里面的话，好的项目非常依赖于众筹平台对于项目的一个审核。如果没有这个的话，可能很难大规模的让特别是股权众筹发展的非常快。
这个问题是问给哪一位，还是问给所有人？然后另外就是下一个问题的时候，尽量把问题做简短一些。This question to all, so yeah, and anyone who want to take it first. Yeah, when you are discussing, and maybe I can give a few thoughts. And I think that what is important in the crowdfunding space is that one, that actually insurance is not an instrument which is really widely used for crowdfunding, and it's really a high risk. And of course, it depends on the size. And if, for example, you are doing the Indiegogo or the reward based, or it's donation based, and no insurance is needed. But if it is P2P or lending-based model, and depend on the size. And if it's really small size, for example, if you use Kiva model, again, I don't think anyone will give you the insurance because it's really small amount. But if you just go beyond that, and then that starts to be really important and interesting. And I do see in the US actually there are some existing examples. And here maybe someone of you can just share with us. Yeah.
I don't have the specific examples, but I have seen a number of developments. I've seen some press reports on people seeking to quantify the risk in any particular campaign. I think the problem with it is that this is such a nascent industry still. We don't really have established metrics. I don't think there are any trends that any insurance underwriter or actuarial scientist would be able to really pinpoint as far as risk. So it just might be too early, and I think it's maybe emblematic in the fact that Indiegogo is providing its own is because they do have visibility of their metrics. They have all of their data available to themselves. How much they release to the public is probably something that they're not interested in doing, and why wouldn't they keep the insurance money themselves if that was the case? So it's a bit of a walled garden in this sense. It may take time before we see the numbers really begin to level out and become more predictable to the satisfaction of insurers. So.
Just one point that I would also make is that you need to look at the margin in play with the platform. That it's not quite credit card charges, but it's not 10 times that. So the platform will curate differently, which some with higher degrees of success. For example, in Australia, we have Possible, who are running close to 70% on most categories. But then there's still failure in terms of campaigns that would otherwise look to succeed. So there's a sort of, we call it special sauce. And until you've run the campaign, it's like you haven't eaten the product yet. So actually defining that in advance is very difficult. Yeah, I think I totally agree. When there's more statistics and there's some clear front runners, then the insurance market will develop, but not sooner.
I think it's a great question, although I didn't hear most of it. I have three thoughts about online insurance and crowdfunding. First, I'm working with a British company, which is a big online insurance website, and I think you're in a perfect position to launch a peer-to-peer platform because you have the most important stuff. You have data, and data is king. If you have data about borrowers, about how much they paid during the last years, defaults, etc., about your clients, I think it could be a great move. And I'm working with at least one company that would like to make the move from only giving insurance to also giving consumer credit. That's first. Second, I think that reward-based crowdfunding is nice, but I would think about other asset classes. It's not the answer to the right question? Okay. They're laughing at me. Second, you were asking if I understood correctly about Indiegogo and Kickstarter. I would go for other asset classes where insurance might be more relevant and instrumental. Because I think that the future is not only on reward-based, that's to say the least, it's on for-profit mechanisms. It goes for equity and debt. And there, if you think about real estate, if you think about other asset classes, I think that insurance can play an instrumental role there. If you'd like to ask a question, you're not getting the book because you left it. And third, I think that currently we will see more and more insurance companies go also to partner with platforms. Because not only because you have access to clients, because you can have all sorts of credit worthiness algorithms, etc. And I would go to be a third-party service provider, or maybe to partner with some other platforms to provide data. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities, and that's only from the gut feeling. I'd love to share more of them later on. Best of luck, anyway.
Yeah, before Scott jumping, and if you're familiar with the Chinese crowdfunding market, and especially for P2P, and for PPDai, that's they don't provide insurance or guarantee, but for Riyendai and some other, that they actually guarantee your return, and which actually is type of insurance. And we in China actually are using insurance quite in the crowdfunding. In addition to that, for example, if you look at Yulebao, and then although they call them as crowdfunding, but actually they are selling insurance and using insurance as the product, crowdfunding product. So the insurance with crowdfunding, the combination in China is actually quite advanced in this regard. Yeah.
It seems there might be a number of insurance products that might be applicable to you. You might want to speak with some attorneys about malpractice insurance as it relates to any platform might have such insurance as well. But on the individual campaigns, I think that's the part where people are really starting to see the potential benefits of an insurance plan, because it will mitigate the risk on the part of the investor. So who knows what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be self-evident fairly soon.
And I also would like to mention that, here sitting in front of us are a lot of experts, and if you have any comment or more points to add, please feel free to just stand up and because I already heard many of you talk about the same issues and a lot of great insights. Please feel free to share anytime.
Just don't throw any fruit. No fruit.
Okay, so any more questions? Okay, gentlemen, yeah.
喂，您好，我也是在国内的一家众筹的平台上面工作。我想请问各位，就是在这个众筹上面肯定会存在着风险，那就有一个风险定价的问题。而在中国有一个现实是叫做刚性兑付，就是不管你的风险的高低，只要我的散户买了你这个不管是股权或者债权，那么你的平台就要赔我。那平台本来是应该充当一个信息中介的 作用，而现在其实大多数平台都是充当了一个信用中介。请问这个局该如何破？谢谢。
因为这个是中国的问题，所以我可以去简单的跟你去分享一下我简单的想法。
那或者就是可以请问一下各位，比如说在美国、澳大利亚和以色列，他们国家有没有一个，如果股权众筹有没有200人的限制，有没有非法集资这样的一个罪名等等等等谢谢。
This is more about the crowdfunding legislation and who are the players, who can play, and because for example in China that we have 200 as the maximum, that beyond that is illegal, and in US I know the number, but I think that maybe our friends from abroad can share that what's the regulation there, and to just make this playground a place where you can play one.
Okay, so this is a relatively straightforward question, although there's a couple of factors to it. So there's a class order relief which has been around for many, many years, which is the formation of the ASL, which allows for 20 retail, so very, very few number, in addition to the exempt investors. Yeah. So then you've got a natural barrier at 50 because of the proprietary limited structure giving way to a public structure, which is more expensive to operate. But and then you've got additional regulations that happen depending on whether you want to be exempt from offer documents, etc., etc. So what we're lobbying for and what we expect in the draft legislation would be at a threshold of 200 with between $2 and $5 million as the raised cap. But that's a combination of things. What we've already seen develop is that it will be a mandatory public company structure. So that that's leaning towards the investor protection argument. So we'd expect more concessions on other areas to facilitate the industry's growth.
Yeah, and also I think this is really Jason's question, because if we just take the US as example, that if it's Title 1, Title 2, Title 3, and 506, A, B, C, and all that, just make it very clear that who can play. And in China, we also already have both P2P and equity-based legislation with very clear definition there. And I think maybe Jason, that if you have several 5 sentences, can you just give about US regulation regarding who can play?
So in the US, it depends on the type of funding that you're going to raise. I think maybe the way to think about it more specifically for this market is the question that the government has to answer is, does it need to be limited by the number of people who can invest, or should it be limited by the amount of money that each individual investor can invest? And the reason, in my view, the reason why the limits were so low of the number of people that could invest, those laws were written 80 years ago, before it was very, very difficult for people a large number of people to understand offering documents and what they were buying and what the sort of exchanges were. But now I think that the number of investors is, certainly is less important in my view than the amount of money each investor can invest. And so I think thinking about what is a manageable amount of risk to allow retail investors to invest. We chose the number of 10% of income or net worth in the US to say that, to make sure, because the question we answered most often when we talked with Congress people was, what happens if grandma loses her life savings, right? And of course, no one ever asked that question when they go to Macau to gamble, but they certainly ask that question about making investments. And so what we have to do is we had to provide a limit that will allow people to invest at a certain amount that allowed them to invest in these high-risk investments, but also made it clear that they should control the amount of investment each person should make. The other thing on insurance, I'll just say, the type of policies that we've seen people talk about creating, similar to what Dan was describing, are not providing 100% coverage, but but providing against catastrophic loss. So to say, with the bar being, if fraud is committed, if fraud is proven in court or by the regulators, then that would be the trigger for the policy to be paid out on. And the policy payment is something in the order of 50% of the investment. So that you're not providing 100% guarantee, but you're providing against, we would call it catastrophic loss. And so that's another insurance question I would suggest. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As a small sidebar, something Jason touched on is the irony of what we face in the U.S. as far as government regulation on this type of investment. And yet, the irony is there's no restriction on how much grandma can lose at the craps table or on a slot machine in Las Vegas. So that irony is something that we live with every day, and it's a glaring example of how the interests may be conflicted between the politicians and what they propose they're doing and what they're actually doing, because corporations have a big share in the interest of politicians. So you may actually have some advantages to that regard over us.
Okay, thank you. And more questions? Okay, I saw you first. Yeah, please.
Hello, my name is Li Zhang. I work for SME Finance Forum at IFC. We're part of the World Bank Group. Apologies, my CEO, Mr. Matthew Ganser, cannot be here. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me regarding what we do. I just have one question, very simple. How do crowdfunding platforms work with traditional financial institutions, particularly like commercial banks? We all know initially crowdfunders jump in the vacuum where traditional VC commercial banks do not really tap into. But maybe there are some other aspects we can work together, like cash flow management, money custody. So I just want to ask each of you from your countries, what do commercial banks usually work with crowdfunding platforms? Thank you very much.
It's a good question. We've actually got one of our major banks, so there's 4 major banks in Australia, which invested $10 million in a fund which started one of the first peer-to-peer platforms, Society One. So that was Westpac investing in a Reinventure fund, which is a major investor in that particular platform. So there's quite a degree of cooperation there and acknowledgement of this emerging sector. Another great example that I saw quite recently was where somebody did a crowdfunding campaign on their own website, not using the platform at all, and they got pre-commitment, so they didn't get paid, but they got pre-commitment for their product, and they went to the bank with those pre-commitments, which were in the thousands, to say, look, we have a customer base, we want an overdraft, and we want it at a fair rate, and they got it. And again, that was a mainstream bank, not mercenary type of lending institution. So I think there's an obvious role there. It'll develop over time as more confidence builds, but particularly where you've got a quality team and a very strong support from your crowd, then the existing financial institutions will be very unwise not to pay attention. So.
I think that's a great question, because scaling up crowdfunding means hybrid, working together with corporates, financial institutes, etc. And I found several examples. First, on a campaign, a financial corporate institute can be the first one to invest, it will be the last one to match the funds. There are platforms where they have investors like lending companies and others that get investments or lending from institutional players. I think there are even more complicated or interesting examples, but when you have campaigns which are endorsed by all sorts of institutes, I think that's the next level. If we were able to harness them by giving them return on investment, by giving them a better image, by providing them with marketing aspects of innovation, they could tap into new markets, and that there were platforms could scale up.
both really good points. I think the phrase that comes to my mind that might really work for many of you is the relationship between crowdfunding and more conventional sources of capital comes in, quote, proof of concept. If you can develop your business plan, if you can pitch your business, if you can secure investors to any banker, to any VC, you've done work that they would otherwise have to pay to do themselves. And that saves them money, and it brings customers to the table, which they're going to have to go acquire later. So you're also saving money on the marketing side. So that's one of the beautiful things about crowdfunding, is that not only are you engaging with supporters, potential investors, but potentially with customers as well. And they're all hopefully going to become evangelists to your product or brand afterward. So it's a tremendous advantage for an upstart company. Many of the presentations I gave, in fact, the first presentation I gave in crowdfunding in 2012 was at a university in Michigan. And I had no idea who the crowd was going to be consisting of, but afterwards I did a survey, and about 80% were private equity investors, venture capitalists, and bankers. And I was really astounded because most of them came with panic button, right? They're ready to push the panic button, thinking that crowdfunding is going to steal their business, it's going to take away from their thunder. And in my opinion, it's exactly the opposite. You couldn't ask for a better mechanism for bankers, for traditional investors, than crowdfunding, because it's taking so much of the risk out when you bring capital to the table. Obviously, just like a bank, they want to see some down payment if you're going to buy a house, that type of thing. And that's really what crowdfunding is doing for you. So it's a very copacetic relationship at the end of the day. And in fact, we're also working on a project with a colleague of mine in Ohio. We have a company called Commonwealth Fund, and we're working on the notion of creating a business, using a business development company model to solicit investors in a particular locale or in a particular vertical industry in order to offset another one of the points on Jason's slide, which is the issue of liquidity. In the United States, when you buy into a startup company, oftentimes your stock in that company is restricted from transfer. You can't sell it for a period of years, sometimes 3-5 years, even longer. So for investors in the new crowdfunding space, especially when they're investing in startup companies where the founders are not seasoned entrepreneurs or are not accountants or bankers or lawyers or anything of a professional capacity, but they have a good idea and they have the passion, all of a sudden you've got a tremendous opportunity there with crowdfunding to change the table. So from the standpoint of conventional investors, this is a real dream come true for them. So.
Since we don't have the European side, and I just add 2 examples, and in Austria and in Netherlands, and then there are already commercial banks which are using crowdfunding to just reinvent their business model, to just expand the portfolio. And when I was in the bank and we talked with IFC how to just use IFC's instrument to leverage commercial banks to provide match funding for P2P type work and also equity. So there are a lot of examples I can share with. Thank you for coming and all the way from DC. Thank you. Yes. Simon, yeah.
Just wanted to add what's happening in the UK, if it helps. So I'll be on the panel later, so you'll hear more from me. But in the UK, it's been passed in legislation that banks have to provide an alternative if they reject a loan. So they have to, by law now, refer to a peer-to-peer lending platform or alternative provider if they can't issue the loan to the business. That's just business as opposed to consumer. The challenge with banks is that their business model relies upon creating money when they issue a loan, which is a lot less profitable than peer-to-peer lending. So if they endorse it, it disrupts their own model, and if they adjust to this model, it's a lot less profitable than the activity they currently take. So it's an interesting scenario for them. In terms of banks endorsing peer-to-peer lending, it still baffles me that retail people, after the amount of crime that's been committed to banks over the last decade or so, people still look to them for credibility, but that's an interesting other source.
I know Simon is very passionate about this particular point of discussion, so I will reinforce what he said. Ultimately, crowdfunding is successful, especially in the peer-to-peer lending space, as we've seen with IPOs such as Lending Club. They're going to put pressure on banks to be more competitive. Ultimately, it's not just about borrowing at the window and then making money by loaning money. It's going to be about competing at rates as well. And we're already seeing the rates from peer-to-peer lending far exceeding that you can get at a bank. So ultimately, they're going to be motivated by competition to participate. And it's fantastic what you said. I didn't know that they're required to make a referral. Early on in the United States, there was a lot of people took issue with the pace at which the SEC was implementing the rules of crowdfunding inclusion in the Jobs Act, at which Jason was critical in the creation of. And so there was an initiative to create what are called intra-state crowdfunding exemptions, where a state can issue its own rules much more quickly and implement them much more quickly than the SEC can for the whole country. And so in intrastate crowdfunding, we actually had discussions with a number of local banks. The problem is in the United States, there's not many local banks left that have the wherewithal or capital to really take risk in a new space that's not proven. But we engaged them initially in the discussion of escrow, holding the money that's raised on a campaign before it's paid out or before it's finished. So that escrow component was critical. And frankly, it was shocking that they're like, yeah, we don't want to take that money. We don't know what to do with that money. We're not sure we can do anything for you. And we were astounded. And that's what caused us then to come back and consider the business development corporation model as a viable alternative. And then the other point that I wanted to make, and I know I'm talking too much, but if you know me, that's what I do. The discussion a lot of times in crowdfunding talks about equity and securities. And while that's good, the rewards and donation space will always be there. It's always going to be kind of an extension. I like to explain it as an extension of the friends and family round. You're just a bigger friends and family round. And instead of just going to Uncle and saying, I've got this idea, now Uncle's going to say, well, I'm glad you have that idea, but why don't you put that up in a crowdfunding platform and then let everybody judge it. So before maybe he throws money at you, he's going to make you go through the effort of making a concise elevator pitch, making a good video, showing good quality copies of your prototype or concept. All of these things are disciplines that an entrepreneur has to have. These are the things that we do at the university in training kids how to take their ideas out of their head and put them onto a shelf. So, but one of the things about securities is it's not all about securities, as we've seen in the success with Lending Club and other P2P models is an example of this. If you have something that's a low barrier, a low cost, and you have enough social network behind it, you should just as easily be able to get equity as you can debt. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, debt is a much more viable vehicle because they're not sacrificing the equity that they really want to hold on to longer, both for control and for profit. So don't think it's all about equity. Strongly consider debt, because if it's a viable business model for debt as a bank would consider it, you might find much more approachable lenders through P2P.
Thank you, Scott. And before lunch, last question. Yeah, and before one big last. Okay, you already stand up. Okay.
那个我是来自于山东临沂王羲之和诸葛亮的老家。那个我是山东那个互家网科技有限公司的那个一个经理。我们公司呢主要是做互联网加行业转型的一个业务。主要呢，今天我想问两个问题。第一，就是在美国、以色列和澳大利亚这个他们3线城市这个纵容这个平台是怎么去发展的？它现在的一个这个层面是处在哪一个层面？第二，作为那个什么总会，它是怎么去支持3线城市或者4线城市这个发展的？好，谢谢。
可能以色列都没有3线城市。
I've actually given this to Paul as a question. I don't know if you don't mind for Paul, but I'll defer because I know ASOP's got a regional city plan, so I'll get maybe some comments from him in a minute. For you guys.
If I understand the question correctly, it was how do middle market cities outside of in the United States, would be the coastal cities that contain most of the investment capital in the United States, how do they compete with coastal capital? And it's a fantastic question, and it's one of the things that inspired me to get involved in crowdfunding as deeply as I have. It goes right back to the early phrase, which is the democratization of capital. And it's not just because it's making it available to people of lesser means, but that it's making the opportunities to invest in potentially breakthrough companies available to everyone regardless of their geography. And traditionally, most technology companies that you'd be familiar with have to go to either the East Coast or the West Coast to find the capital and the resources and the human resources in order to, commercialize their idea. So now we're starting to see, and my school is part of this, University of Toledo is part of this, we're starting to see universities finally get the opportunity to help build new industries based on their contribution to the local economy. Research universities are often seen as instigators or the research and development process, whether it's through sponsored research or whether it's through faculty research. But now we're actually going to be able to empower the students to do this, and this is what's driving me. So part of the answer to your question is through universities. I would strongly advise you to participate with them at all costs. And then also through associations like ours, we have one member of the board of directors, our eldest member, Thel Woods, from the state of Michigan, who's been instrumental in interstate offering opportunities in the state of Michigan, which is one of the first states to adopt interstate rules. He is always beating the drum about local exchanges, about local associations, and so he is also desirous of us to create state-by-state chapters. And so that would be another way. So I would advise you to work with the society and other organizations to form smaller groups within smaller markets.
Maybe just pass to Paul. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, if you remember what Scott said, it was about local and meaningful. And what we've found that 63% of the investors in any raise are local. So therefore, I believe it's more about the raise than about the platform. That if you drive your raise on a platform to get local investment, it'd be good if the platform was local. You'd probably do better, but it doesn't need to be local. But your raise needs to be local. You need to focus on the group of people around the company that are going to give you the money. So some platforms in the United States and different countries allow people to clone the platform and use it in another jurisdiction. And so that's what it's all about. I know, Scott, you've got platforms all around the world. This is happening. Platforms are becoming local, but it's really the raise that drives it.
I didn't hear the question, but I'll answer from my heart, and I hope it was what you meant. I think that the biggest opportunities are not where there are alternatives for other financing, because I guess it in Beijing and Shanghai and other, I'm not well familiar with geography of China, there are other ways to get money. But I guess if you're going further, it will be harder and harder. And there is where crowdfunding and internet-based finance can be instrumental in bridging the gap, financing to SMEs and to other entrepreneurs on a much more wider scale. And I don't think that the origin of the platform matters more than educating the market, getting to the high-quality entrepreneurs and bringing them online so that can others invest in them. So bridging the gap, I think, is one of the major opportunities, because if you are looking for the Chinese voice, is going for the mass market. Going for the mass market in China means bridging the gap here. So I think it's a great way to look at crowdfunding. I'm not certain I answered your question.
You definitely got it, because that's exactly the question, that from different regions, because in China we have the first layer, second layer, third layer, some excessive supply and the others really don't have enough. So then how does crowdfunding can really supply for those areas where that they don't have enough supply of capital? You definitely address that. And maybe using this as a closing, and so you can address this in your final words, but the final words will be that you give maybe one or two suggestions that what we need to do better or we need to be careful about when we just want to build a healthy crowdfunding ecosystem. Of course, you can add that comment for that question, and please.
That actually segued really well into something that I wanted to add. That from an Australian perspective, looking at what's happening in the rest of the world at the same time as Australia's changes, what's quite clear is that it's not just the regulations that relate to directly to crowdfunding. It's the broader regulation. So we see in the UK what appears to be best case model because of the percentage of raisers that are successful in an equity area. But you need to keep in mind that there's also 85p in a pound as a tax relief for nearly all of those raisers. So the regulation relating to startup taxation, relating to broader corporate governance, as well as direct market and dealership makes a huge difference. And I guess on that point, and particularly being in China, there's a couple of significant updates in this space from Australia. We have essentially a billion good reasons to welcome Chinese investors to Australia now because of the early stage venture capital partnership program being expanded to and having an additional requirement where $500,000 of the minimum investment needs to be placed by migrants to Australia. So those are sophisticated visa holders being required to invest in the startup space, and then an additional 1.5 million of the 5 million being in small cap companies. That's forecast to the 1st of July to increase to 1st of July 2017 to increase to $1 million in the startup space. So to boil that down into something that is quite clear, that $1 billion of international money will come to China free, and that will then pass out into the startup community of Australia. So I think it's one very positive step which has been made in advance of the crowdfunding regulation, and it's something that I'm personally associated with. And I guess whilst we don't have a large investor community in the audience, we do have a very strong affiliation between Australia and China, so I expect that to continue and to accelerate. And also, particularly being a fintech investor myself, I'm very excited about that too. So I would take that as a two-way lesson for China to have to compete. So it's not just changing crowdfunding regulation, you need broader reforms and innovation, which I've already seen in the media, but I'd like to the next time I come back to visit, to see a lot more of that. So I'm sure that society will be part of that story.
Thank you, Dupo. Scott, just a hint that, don't rely on the survey, because a lot of us, or Chinese, don't like to raise their hands if you ask. So maybe there are a lot of investors, a lot of entrepreneurs, but they just don't want to raise their hands. So yeah, just something. Okay.
I'll be very quick, unusually quick. In reflect of what Paul said about local again, this is critical, and I would ask you to take one thing home from me today, and it's this. There's a difference. In the U.S., the corporations are kind of at odds with the people. And this comes down to a key notion that most corporations in the United States are profit-minded, and I mean profit at all costs. And what they call it is shareholder value. I think it's disingenuous to use the term shareholder value when what they're saying actually is profit at all costs. So we're starting to see a movement, what's sometimes termed as the triple bottom line. And maybe it's something that you would grab onto here, because I understand triple happiness is a common phrase as well. But the triple bottom line is one that benefits not just the shareholders, but also the ecology and the community. And so in the case of crowdfunding, I think it has the spirit of the triple bottom line at heart. And so I would send with you one thing, and that is, don't consider just looking for shareholders, because what you should get in the process and what benefits from a successful offering are more than shareholders, they're stakeholders. And that is everybody and anybody. So if one company is successful in a small market, especially the middle markets, the rippling effect from that one success affect everyone in the community, and they're all stakeholders. So even if someone can't invest or isn't interested in investing, enlist them anyway, because they have a vested interest in its success as a stakeholder in that community itself.
The toughest role, I'm the one that stands between you and the food. So I'll be very short. I think that learning from others' experiences is nice, but if I were you, as the Chinese Association, I would reinvent crowdfunding. You have so much assets. So learning is nice, and learning about best practices, that's nice. But I'm, as an Israeli, would shorten the learning curve and then start doing. Can Alibaba be the biggest reward-based crowdfunding platform, much bigger than Indiegogo and Kickstarter, only to implement, donate or invest in Alibaba, and then you become the biggest. You don't need anyone else. Can you take millions of people with a smartphone and take a $1 investment and make the fees much smaller so they can make savings via peer-to-peer platform? Can we reinvent crowdfunding based on your assets? I'm here only 24 hours. I met with great talents, lots of motivation. The crowd is absolutely here. And I think you could be the leader very soon. Best of luck.
Okay, thank you very much. And because of the efficiency of our earlier speaker, that this session we have more time to just to really enjoy your insights. And let's give all the speakers a round of applause. Thank you very much. And now, Ali, please tell us that what to do next. Thank you again.